There was a measure in California that was really pushed by, of course, not a small business, big businesses, Lyft and Uber. That was Prop 22, that they wanted a carve out for their particular industries, for basically these rideshare companies, because they took a look at this ABC test and said, oh, this actually kind of defines exactly all of our Uber drivers, all of our Lyft drivers. Our entire business model would be destroyed by this test. So like, we really need to fight against this. And so there were a lot of people that were especially unions that were, I think, that were fighting against the passing of Prop 22, and they it ended up passing. So there's this carve out, and that's really the irony of this law in California, is that, like I said, the ABC test primarily impacts these smaller businesses, and the one carve out that happened did not end up helping out any small businesses. It ended up helping, I don't know if you could call them big tech, but fairly big tech. I mean, Uber and Lyft Uber at the very least is international. Lyft, I'm not sure, but is definitely national. These are not small startups anymore.
Yeah, they've certainly grown to be big conglomerates, and a lot of big labor proponents use them as scapegoats to say, well, let's look at the case of these companies. We keep hearing inklings of drivers saying they're exploited, they don't have benefits. So they go in and say, well, these people need rescuing from unions, these drivers who largely don't want to be unionized. And then they say, well, let's give them benefits because they need it. And actually, Uber, I think if private companies decide to give workers benefits, and maybe there's like portable benefits and there's some sort of middle ground you can approach without calling these workers employees, that's still being debated, whether or not you can encourage portable benefits. Although I think the freelancers have to look for portable benefits themselves. So you're in control of your healthcare, your dental, and then not have companies kind of be at the behest of your healthcare decisions. That's another sub conversation. And I'm hoping to learn more about that myself, because healthcare is a whole nother mess as it relates to workers. But a lot of people want to put more constraints on healthcare, not give people choices. And so there will probably be a wider conversation about the benefit discussion, although that's a really minor piece of why people choose to go into freelancing. You don't hear, even anecdotally, a gig worker who was an Uber or Lyft driver and say, you know what? I'm driving because I'm just really gung-ho about the benefits. Like, I really need benefits right now. And this is not to say that benefits aren't important, but they're very secondary or even tertiary when it comes to what motivates workers to work or pick up different contract gigs. You're going to hear a lot of Uber and Lyft drivers, for instance, say, I really love the flexibility. I love being able to work for both Uber and Lyft, or maybe one or the two, maybe DoorDash, perhaps working for another company on the side. I've met a lot of immigrants too, who are fresh to the United States, who said, because of certain limitations to employment as a green card holder, as a person with a work visa, I can't get a full-time job. So I think they found refuge in Uber and Lyft because it's not so strenuous in terms of the barriers to entry for certain workers. So they look to that as an option when they're just fresh out of their home country, settling here in the United States. These people who come here legally, of course, with documentation, and they find these outlets here and say, this is a good starting point. It's not my end all be all for my career choice. I actually met someone who's a doctor who said that it's really hard for him to immediately explore his profession here. He was a doctor back in, I think, Pakistan. And then he said that he's doing Uber and Lyft because he wants to make money in preparation for going back into the medical field. And you hear this echoed across different, let's say, Uber and Lyft drivers who tell you they love it. They may not be so loving about it, perhaps, but it's convenient and it pays the bills. But you won't hear abject hatred of it from most workers unless someone is disgruntled. Maybe they found someone to say, let's go after Uber and Lyft, maybe a frivolous lawsuit. You never know. They can find, there are a lot of ambulance chasers out there, as you know, in the legal profession. So they could find some disgruntled former driver who wanted to sue Uber or Lyft on some grounds that they were misclassifying them or exploiting them. Although you willingly go into a contract that you signed with the company as a driver, you agree to their terms and conditions, you're using your car to pick up, drop off passengers. So you're really in control of what you do, although you are handed different tasks and responsibilities, but you have the freedom to pick the route you want to choose, the passengers you want to take, you give ratings to passengers, and then you just use that model for yourself and apply that in your driving responsibilities. And you can apply that to other type of gig work like this, from bigger businesses like Uber, Lyft, DoorDash, things of that sort. And so maybe save for a small sampling. Most drivers that I've encountered anecdotally, I've driven Uber, Lyft a couple dozen times, never really hear anything super bad. Like I said, I think a lot of people, especially if they're immigrants and they're new to the country, they think it's a refuge for them to get their starting point in their career here in the United States, because it is really hard to find a job. I know from my family's experience, when you're here just learning English, maybe, or you have no idea how the United States work, finding employment is extremely hard if you want to contribute to the fabric of this country, because most people think, well, they're not going to come here and work. But a lot of people actually do come here and they really want to work because they didn't have those opportunities in their home country. So as a way to kind of like help people climb the economic ladder, this is a really good introductory tool. Is it perfect? No. Could there be improvements made? Absolutely. But to completely upend the system by classifying the workers as employees, pretty controversial. And that's what California demonstrated, especially with the populace there. Like, California is very, very far to the left. And a plurality of the vote in 2020 voted 56, 57% to allow Prop 22 to go into effect, to vote it in under the ballot initiative, and for the California government to adopt it into law as a carve out for AB 5. So it's really interesting to see that play out, especially the fact that big labor has a big hold in California. They're very influential in Sacramento.
Right.
And so the people spoke. So maybe the sort of advocacy in Sacramento is really disconnected from the overwhelming majority of California voters. And that's really interesting. Like I said, it's like a schism between the far left and maybe the moderate left in California. And so it's really interesting to just observe that and see what will happen if this were to take hold federally. But in California, even where big labor reigns supreme, the voters said, this is too extreme. We can't afford this. And even if we have our grievances with Uber and Lyft, this is a big, big step too far and away from the intention of trying to make worker freedom palatable to the masses.